Horrifying is the moment a young, desperate mother cried until there were no tears left beside the tiny coffin of the daughter she believed had died at birth, only to hear, 2 years later, in the freezing Christmas rain, that very same child look straight into her eyes and utter one single word in Korean. Eomma, mommy. Can you even imagine the heart-shattering instant when you realize the baby you once held in your grief-stricken arms is actually alive, stolen from you by a ruthless conspiracy of the rich and powerful? A destitute, skeletal waitress, starving and shivering, accidentally steps into the luxurious hell of Seattle's coldest, most untouchable tech billionaire, and unwittingly awakens a fierce, violent, all-consuming love he never knew he was capable of feeling. A story drenched in tears, packed with drama, revenge, and redemption, where poverty clashes head-on with ultimate power, where a mother's love is trampled, yet explodes back stronger than ever. Today, join me on Emily and Daniel's gut-wrenching yet breathtaking journey. Are you ready for your heart to be ripped wide open? Stay until the very end, because the finale will leave you crying tears of pure joy. Let's begin right now. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel, Alex Truths, and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. It was a stormy Christmas Eve in Seattle, the rain pounding against the windows of the upscale Korean fusion restaurant in Bellevue like it wanted to break in. I, Emily Harper, 25 years old and feeling every one of those years in my aching bones, adjusted my soaked apron for the 100th time that night. My hands were raw from washing dishes in the back when they needed extra help on the floor, and my thin coat, my only coat, had done nothing against the wind on the long bus ride from my rundown studio in Rainier Valley. I was thin, too thin, my cheeks hollow from too many skipped meals to pay the overdue rent. Nights on friends' couches or in shelters when the heat got cut off had left dark circles under my eyes that no amount of cheap concealer could hide. Poverty wasn't just a word for me. It was the constant gnawing hunger, the humiliation of digging through dumpsters for returnable cans, the dizziness from standing too long on cold, windy streets, waiting for a late bus that might never come. I was destitute, powerless, one missed shift away from eviction. But tonight, the tips might be good. The place was packed with the wealthy, tech executives in tailored suits, their laughter loud over glasses of expensive soju. I carried a tray of banchan toward the secluded corner table, my legs trembling from exhaustion. That's when I saw him. Daniel Kim sat like a king in the shadows, fair-skinned with sharp features that spoke of old money and unbreakable power. At 32, he was the CEO of one of Seattle's biggest AI firms, the kind whispered about in rumors of government contracts and untouchable influence. His dark suit probably cost more than I made in a year, but it was the little girl in the high chair beside him that caught my heart. Sophia, 2 years old, with soft curls and solemn eyes too old for her face. She clutched a worn plush magpie, silent as always, or so the staff whispered. I approached carefully, my voice soft and timid. "Good evening, sir. Still or sparkling water?" He didn't look up at first, murmuring, "Sparkling," and warm milk for her, not hot. As I poured, my sleeve brushed the table, and a faint scent of cheap vanilla soap from my morning shower at the community center wafted up. Daniel stiffened, his dark eyes lifting to mine with an intensity that made my knees weaken. Something flashed there. Recognition? Pain? It vanished, replaced by cold command. I turned to Sophia with a forced smile, whispering, "And for you, sweetheart." Her head lifted slowly. When our eyes met, the world tilted. A jolt shot through my chest, like waking from a nightmare I'd buried deep. 2 years ago, desperate for money after my father's death left me with nothing, I'd been a surrogate. They told me the baby girl didn't survive. I'd mourned a ghost ever since, naming her in my heart. Sophia's plush dropped. Her lip trembled. Tears welled. Daniel leaned in, voice laced with panic I didn't expect from such a powerful man. "Sophia, my treasure, what's wrong?" She ignored him, small hands reaching for me. Then it came, a rusty, broken sound. "Eomma!" The word hung in the air, Korean for mommy, echoing in the sudden hush. Daniel froze, his hand inching toward his jacket. Inside, guilt gnawed at him like acid, the remorse from years of ruthless deals, the violent conflict raging in his soul over the empire he'd built on shadows. But seeing Sophia speak for the first time, to this stranger, it tore at him. "Eomma!" Sophia cried louder, lunging forward. The room went silent, my eyes filled with tears I couldn't explain. Horror flooded me, confusion, fear, a dizzy numbness that made the floor sway. Who was this child? Why did my empty arms ache so fiercely? Daniel stood abruptly, towering and dangerous. Outside, rival crews, jealous of his tech dominance, lurked in the rain. But his men held them back with tense standoffs, words sharp as knives. No blows landed, yet suspense thick. "Who are you?" Daniel growled at me, voice low but promising storms. I backed away, tray trembling. "Just a waitress, sir, I swear." But Sophia screamed, pointing. "Eomma, up!" Daniel's eyes narrowed, scanning me. Inside, an overwhelming surge hit him. Not suspicion alone, but something fiercer, passionate from the first glance. This fragile woman, malnourished yet resilient, stirred a love he'd never known, violent in its intensity, clashing with his gnawing remorse for the life he'd led. He signaled his security. The restaurant cleared in seconds. As guards approached me, unfair fate twisted again. The bus I'd miss, the eviction notice waiting, the cold night ahead. But Daniel's gaze held mine, conflicted, remorseful, yet burning with sudden consuming protection. "You aren't leaving tonight," he said quietly, lifting Sophia, who reached for me over his shoulder. My world spun into disorientation, fear, curiosity, a pitiful spark of hope amid the humiliation of my poverty. Little did I know, this powerful man, torn by inner demons, had already fallen, hard, irrevocably, for the destitute woman his daughter called mommy. The black Rivian SUV cut through the rain-slicked streets of Bellevue like a blade, tires hissing over wet asphalt. I sat in the back, wrists bound with soft zip ties that still bit into my skin, flanked by two silent men in dark suits. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack a rib. The world outside blurred, Christmas lights on million-dollar homes, families warm inside, while I, Emily Harper, was being taken God knows where by the most powerful man in Seattle. I had nothing. No phone, no purse, only the damp waitress apron still knotted around my waist, and the thin sweater that had been my only armor against December wind. My studio apartment in Rainier Valley, really just a single room with a hot plate and a bathroom down the hall, was probably already locked by the landlord for missed rent. The eviction notice had come 3 days ago. I had planned to sleep in the 24-hour laundromat tonight, curled on plastic chairs with my coat as a blanket. That was my life. Cold, hungry, hopeless. And now this. The gates of Mercer Island opened without a sound, and the SUV wound up a private drive lined with evergreens dripping rain. The house appeared like a fortress of glass and steel, lights glowing warm against the storm. I had seen pictures of places like this in magazines I flipped through while waiting for job interviews I never got. But never in person, never this close. The guards marched me through a marble foyer that smelled of cedar and subtle wealth. My soaked shoes left muddy prints on the floor, humiliating evidence of where I came from. One guard cut the zip ties, and I rubbed my wrists, numb and shaking. Daniel Kim stood at the foot of a sweeping staircase, Sophia cradled against his chest. The little girl's arms were outstretched toward me, her small voice repeating the word that had shattered everything. Eomma, Eomma. He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his fair-skinned face fractured. Guilt, raw and gnawing, flickered behind those dark eyes. Guilt for the empire he had built on secrets and shadows. Remorse for the man he had become. And now a violent, tearing conflict because his daughter, silent for 2 years, was speaking only to a destitute stranger. "Take her to the East guest suite," he told the guards, voice low. "No locks on the inside. Post 2 men outside the door." I found my voice small and timid. "Sir, please, I have to get home. I have a shift tomorrow. I can't lose this job." He flinched as if I had struck him. Home. The word hung between us like an accusation. He knew what my home was. A crumbling studio with barred windows, a refrigerator that held only condiments, a mattress on the floor because I had sold the bed frame for bus fare. He had already run the background check. He knew everything. "You're not going anywhere tonight," he said quietly. Not a threat, a promise. They led me upstairs. The guest suite was larger than any apartment I had ever lived in. King bed with silk sheets, a fireplace already lit, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the black water of Lake Washington. A platter of food waited on a side table. Warm bibimbap, fresh fruit, steamed mandu. My stomach twisted painfully. I hadn't eaten since yesterday's half sandwich from the restaurant's discarded staff meal. I sank onto the edge of the bed, dizziness washing over me. Shock, exhaustion, fear. My hands shook so badly I couldn't hold the water glass. Tears came then, silent and hot. How had my life come to this? One moment serving water, the next kidnapped by a billionaire because his daughter called me mommy. Downstairs, Daniel paced the library like a caged animal. His head of security, Min, stood rigid. "Boss, the Lee faction followed us from Bellevue. They're parked 2 blocks down, 4 cars. They know we brought a civilian in." Daniel's jaw tightened. The Lees, rival Korean-American investors who wanted his government AI contracts, had been circling for months. Tonight they had seen weakness, a woman, a child, chaos. "Handle it," Daniel said. "No blood on the street. Just send the message." Minutes later, I heard raised voices outside, tense, controlled. Through the window, I watched black SUVs block the road. Daniel stepped into the rain himself, coat open, fair skin pale under the security lights. Words were exchanged, sharp, low, dangerous. One of the rival men reached inside his jacket. Daniel's guards moved like shadows. No shots, just the weight of power, the unspoken threat of what would happen if lines were crossed. The Lees backed down, cars reversing into the night. Daniel returned soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. He came straight to my door, dismissing the guards with a gesture. When he entered, the room seemed to shrink around his presence. I stood, backing against the wall, thin arms wrapped around myself. "Please, I don't understand any of this." He stopped several feet away, as if afraid to come closer. Water dripped from his coat onto the hardwood. His eyes, those eyes that commanded boardrooms and silenced enemies, were tormented. "I don't either," he admitted, voice rough. "My daughter hasn't spoken since her mother died. Not a sound. Doctors said trauma, selective mutism. And tonight, the first word out of her mouth is for you." Sophia had been brought in by a nanny, now asleep in a small bed in the adjoining room, clutching her plush magpie. She had refused to let go of my hand until exhaustion took her. Daniel looked at his sleeping daughter, then at me, and the conflict in him was visible. Remorse for the ruthless choices that had isolated him, guilt for the danger his world brought to this child, and now something new, something fierce and burning that terrified him more than any rival. He stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "You're starving," he said softly, noticing how my collarbones showed sharply under the thin sweater. "When did you last eat a real meal?" Humiliation burned my cheeks. "Yesterday," I whispered. "Half a sandwich." His face twisted, anger, not at me, but at the unfairness that had let this happen in his city, under his watch. He picked up the tray himself and brought it to me. "Eat, please." I sat, legs unsteady, and took small bites under his watchful gaze. The food was warm, flavorful, impossibly kind. Tears fell into the rice. I couldn't stop them. He knelt in front of me, Daniel Kim, worth billions, on his knees before a destitute waitress. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, voice breaking for the first time, "but I can't let you leave. Not until I understand why she chose you." Inside him, the surge came sudden and overwhelming. Suspicion still lingered, yes, but beneath it, deeper, was love. Not gentle or gradual, violent, consuming. The moment he had seen my hollow cheeks, my trembling hands, the quiet resilience in my eyes, despite everything the world had taken, he had fallen, hard, irrevocably. And it terrified him. Because loving me meant dragging me into his darkness. Because protecting me meant admitting how badly he needed saving himself. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, two broken souls, one forged in unimaginable wealth and isolation, the other crushed by relentless poverty, sat in quiet, condensed stillness. The gap between us was vast, unfair, absurd. Yet in that moment, with his sleeping daughter breathing softly nearby, and my tears falling silently into warm food I hadn't earned, something shifted. The prison wasn't just the house on Mercer Island. It was the space between what we had been and what we might become. Morning light filtered through the heavy silk curtains of the guest suite, soft and golden, the kind of light that belonged only to houses where money insulated everything from the harshness of the world. I woke on the enormous bed, still in my damp waitress uniform, my body aching from the unnatural softness of a mattress that didn't sag in the middle like the one I'd left behind in Rainier Valley. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the memory crashed back, the restaurant, the word Eomma, the black SUV, Daniel Kim's tormented eyes, and dizziness swept over me so violently I had to grip the headboard to keep from falling. My stomach growled painfully. The tray from last night sat untouched after those few humiliating bites under his gaze. Pride had stopped me from devouring it like the starving woman I was. Pride and fear. I stood on unsteady legs, thin and weak from months of malnutrition. My reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror stopped me cold. Hollow cheeks, bruised shadows under my eyes, hair lank from too many nights sleeping in shelters where showers were rationed. I looked like a ghost, a pitiful 25-year-old ghost who had once dreamed of art school before poverty swallowed everything. A soft knock sounded. A kind-faced older woman entered with fresh clothes folded over her arm, soft cashmere sweater, tailored jeans, things that probably cost more than my monthly food budget. Mr. Kim thought these might fit, she said gently. Breakfast is ready downstairs when you're comfortable. Comfortable. The word felt absurd. I changed slowly, the fabric against my skin foreign and luxurious. In the pocket of my old apron, my fingers closed around the only thing I owned of value, a small jade magpie pendant on a worn red cord. I'd bought it at a thrift store the week after the clinic told me my baby girl hadn't survived. A foolish indulgence, $5 I couldn't spare, but the magpie was meant to bring joy and good news in Korean folklore. I'd worn it every day since, a secret talisman for the child I'd never held. Downstairs, the house unfolded like a dream I didn't deserve. Marble floors warmed from beneath, original art on the walls that museums would envy, the faint scent of fresh coffee and something baking. I followed the sounds of a child's laughter, clear, musical laughter, and found myself in a sunlit breakfast room overlooking the lake. Sophia sat in a high chair, banging a spoon happily. When she saw me, her face lit up. "Eomma," she cried, arms reaching. My heart tore open. I crossed the room without thinking, knees buckling as I reached her. She smelled like baby shampoo and warmth, things I'd forgotten existed. Tears blurred my vision as I touched her curls, so soft, so real. Daniel stood at the window, phone to his ear, voice low and commanding. He wore a charcoal sweater that hugged his broad shoulders, fair skin almost luminous in the morning light. Power radiated from him, the kind that bent the world to his will, but his posture was rigid, as if carrying an invisible weight. He ended the call abruptly when he saw me holding Sophia. Something fierce flashed across his face, suspicion warring with raw, aching need. "Min says the leaf action is moving again," he told the empty air, more to himself than me. They followed the delivery truck to the gate at dawn. My arms tightened around Sophia instinctively. Delivery truck. Even breakfast required armed escorts in his world. Daniel crossed to us in 3 strides. "We're going out," he said quietly. "I need answers, and I need them today." The drive into Seattle was silent, except for Sophia's happy babbling in her car seat. She kept reaching forward to touch my hair, saying, "Eomma," like a prayer. Each time, pain and wonder twisted deeper in my chest. We pulled up to an exclusive fertility clinic in Madison Park. Glass walls, discreet signage, the kind of place that catered only to the ultra-wealthy. I recognized it immediately. My breath caught. "This is where," I whispered. Daniel's hand brushed mine on the seat, accidental or not. Electricity shot through me. His fingers lingered a fraction longer than necessary before pulling away. Inside, the receptionist paled when she saw Daniel. We were ushered into a private office immediately. A nervous doctor, Dr. Park, entered, folders trembling in his hands. Daniel wasted no time. 2 years ago, a surrogate named Emily Harper. Tell me everything. Dr. Park's eyes darted to me. Recognition and fear flickered. "Mr. Kim, there were complications. The child was stillborn. We informed Miss Harper." "Liar," Daniel said softly. The single word carried more menace than shouting. Sophia chose that moment to pull the plush magpie from her pocket, the one she'd clutched last night. She held it up proudly. My hand went to my throat. The jade pendant. I pulled it out slowly, the red cord frayed from constant wear. Dr. Park went white. Daniel took the necklace from my fingers, his touch gentle despite the storm in his eyes. He compared it to the tiny gold bracelet on Sophia's wrist, an engraved jade magpie charm, identical in every detail. "The twin pendant," Dr. Park stammered. We gave one to the birth mother as a keepsake, standard for closed surrogacies." Birth mother. The room spun. I gripped the chair arm, dizziness threatening to pull me under. "You told me she died," I whispered. "You showed me a tiny body. Let me grieve for 2 years." Remorse twisted Daniel's features. gnawing, violent remorse that this deception had happened under his nose, in his city, to the woman now holding his daughter. He stepped between me and the doctor, shielding. "Explain, now." As Dr. Park began to speak, halting words about failed embryos, decisions made without consent, a cover-up to spare a grieving widower, the unfairness of it all crashed over me like the December rain outside. I had sold plasma twice a week to afford bus fare to that clinic, slept in emergency rooms when shelters were full, mourned alone in a studio where the heat rarely worked, wearing every sweater I owned to bed. While across the lake, my daughter, had grown up in unimaginable luxury, silent because part of her knew she was missing something essential. Tears fell hot and silent. Sophia reached up, confused, patting my wet cheeks. "Eomma sad?" Daniel turned to me then. The suspicion was gone, burned away by truth. In its place, love, not soft or cautious, fierce, overwhelming, passionate from the first moment it ignited, now roaring into an inferno that terrified him as much as it consumed him. He knelt again before me, this powerful man whose name made boardrooms tremble. His hand cupped my thin face with impossible tenderness. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking, "for every night you were cold, every meal you missed, every tear you cried alone." Outside, tires screeched. Through the clinic windows, I saw black sedans blocking the street. Leaf action again, bolder now that Daniel was exposed with a vulnerable woman and child. Daniel stood swiftly, positioning himself between us and the glass. His security poured from vehicles, forming a wall. Words were exchanged, sharp, low warnings. One rival made a threatening gesture. Daniel's men countered with calm, unbreakable presence. The standoff lasted minutes that felt like hours, rain pounding harder, until the Lees retreated once more. But the message was clear. Daniel's enemies smelled weakness. He turned back to me, eyes blazing with protective fury and something deeper, more dangerous. "You're coming home," he said. Not a request. Home. The word tore at my heart, because the crumbling studio waiting for me wasn't home anymore, and this glass palace of wealth felt like a dream I would wake from to find myself freezing on a sidewalk grate. Yet when he took my hand, strong, warm, certain, and led me back to the car with Sophia on his hip, I followed. Because for the first time in years, someone was fighting the unfairness for me. Because the Jade Magpies had found each other. Because in Daniel Kim's tormented gaze, I saw not just protection, but a love so intense it threatened to burn us both alive. And God help me, some desperate, impoverished part of my soul wanted to burn. The drive back to Mercer Island felt endless, though the rain had softened to a mist that clung to the evergreens like tears. Sophia slept in her car seat, small hand still curled around my finger as if afraid I would vanish. I stared at our joined hands, her plump, warm fingers against my thin, calloused ones, and felt the world tilt again. Dizziness came in waves, numbness spreading from my chest outward until I could barely feel the seat beneath me. Daniel drove himself this time, security vehicles fore and aft. His profile was sharp against the gray light, jaw clenched so tightly I wondered if it hurt. Every few minutes, his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, not just checking traffic, but watching me, watching Sophia, as if we might dissolve if he looked away too long. Inside him, torment raged, gnawing remorse for the wife he had lost, for the empire that had demanded too much, for the silence he had accepted in his daughter because he believed it was grief they shared. And now this, learning that silence had been separation, that the woman beside him had paid the price for his ignorance with years of cold, hungry nights. The conflict was violent, tearing at his soul. How could he atone for pain he hadn't known he caused? We entered the estate through reinforced gates that closed with a heavy finality. Waiting on the front steps was a man in an expensive coat, face pale. Dr. Park, summoned again. Daniel's expression darkened. "Inside," he said quietly. "Library." The library was a cathedral of books and dark wood, fireplace crackling, leather chairs that probably cost more than my entire existence. I sat on the edge of one, Sophia in my lap, now awake and content, playing with the jade magpie pendant that hung between us. Dr. Park stood awkwardly, folders clutched like a shield. Daniel didn't sit. He paced, power coiled in every step. "Start from the beginning," he commanded. "Grace, the surrogacy, all of it." Dr. Park's voice trembled as he began. 10 years ago, Daniel had been diagnosed with leukemia, aggressive, fatal without intervention. Grace, his fiancée then, had donated bone marrow anonymously, insisting her name be kept from him so he would never feel indebted. The transplant saved his life, but left Grace with severe scarring in her reproductive system. Infertility, permanent. She never told him. When they married, and Daniel, now building his tech empire, spoke of wanting an heir, Grace panicked. Pride, love, fear of losing him. She approached the clinic alone, arranged everything, used Daniel's stored samples from before treatment, found a surrogate desperate enough to accept closed terms. Me. I listened, the words landing like blows. Grace had chosen me because my file showed desperation. Father dead from medical debt, no family, no safety net. An easy loose end, they thought. Embryos from Grace's eggs failed repeatedly. Time running out, Grace authorized the unthinkable. Use my egg with Daniel's sample. Without my knowledge, without consent. Then Grace died suddenly in recovery after a minor procedure related to the stress. Dr. Park, terrified of scandal, told me the baby was stillborn, showed me a tiny shrouded form that wasn't mine, paid me the final installment and sent me away to grieve, gave Sophia to Daniel as the miracle child who saved him from grief. I rocked slowly, Sophia's weight the only thing keeping me anchored. Tears fell onto her curls. 2 years. 2 years of sleeping under bridges when shelters were full, of eating from food bank lines, of waking from nightmares where I held a cold baby. While my daughter lived in this palace, silent because some part of her knew I was missing. Unfair. Absurdly, cruelly unfair. Daniel stopped pacing. His fair-skinned face was ashen, eyes haunted. "She saved my life," he whispered, and never told me what it cost her. Remorse crashed over him, violent, consuming. He had built billions on AI that predicted threats, yet missed the greatest sacrifice in his own home. Missed the deception that stole a mother's child. He turned to me, dropping to one knee again, the powerful man brought low. "Emily," his voice broke. "I didn't know about any of it." I couldn't speak. Shock had numbed my tongue. Sophia patted my wet cheek. "Eomma cry?" Outside, engines revved. Through the tall windows, I saw movement at the gates. More black cars, Lee faction again, bolder in daylight. They blocked the drive, men stepping out with deliberate calm. Daniel rose swiftly, positioning himself between us and the glass. His security met them halfway. Tense words exchanged across the lawn, hands visible but ready. One rival gestured threateningly toward the house. Daniel's men closed ranks. Minutes stretched, rain starting again, until the intruders backed off once more. But they would return. They always did when they sensed vulnerability. Daniel returned soaked for the second time in 24 hours. Water dripped from his hair as he knelt before me again. "You're not safe out there," he said fiercely. "Not anymore. The world knows I have weaknesses now." Weaknesses. Me. Sophia. The love in his eyes was no longer hidden. It burned, passionate, overwhelming, born in the moment he'd seen my hollow face and recognized suffering his wealth should have prevented. It terrified him, this love, because it made him vulnerable too. "I can't let you go back to that life," he continued, voice rough. "The cold, the hunger, the danger." Back to what? My studio had likely been cleared out by now. Belongings in trash bags on the curb because rent was 3 months late. My job gone after missing shifts. Friends who had stopped answering when I asked to crash one too many times. I was nothing. No one. Yet here, in this impossible place, I was everything to a child. And, Daniel's gaze said, perhaps to him. Night fell early in December. Dinner was served in a dining room that could seat 30. Crystal, silver, food I couldn't name but tasted like heaven. I ate slowly, afraid to seem greedy, while Sophia fed me bites from her plate with chubby fingers. Daniel watched every mouthful as if memorizing the sight of me nourished. After Sophia was asleep in the nursery, monitored by nannies and cameras, he found me in the library again. I stood at the windows, staring at the dark lake, jade pendant clutched tight. He approached slowly. "There's a trust," he said quietly, "set up for Sophia, but also provisions. Grace made sure any biological mother would be cared for if the truth ever—" He couldn't finish. Money. He was offering money. Part of me, the desperate, freezing part, wanted to fall to my knees in gratitude. The rest recoiled. I wasn't a problem to be solved with funds. "I didn't come here for your wealth," I whispered, voice timid but steady. "I came because my daughter called me Eomma." The words hung between us. Daniel closed the distance, stopping inches away. Rain still clung to his hair. His hand rose, hesitating, then gently brushed a strand from my face. The touch ignited something electric, dangerous. "I know," he said, voice low and raw, "and I'm falling in love with you for it." The confession stole my breath. Shock, confusion, a dizzy rush that made me sway. This man, powerful beyond imagining, tormented by guilt and remorse, was saying he loved me. Me, the woman who had eaten expired yogurt from dumpsters to survive. It was unfair, absurd, impossible. Yet when his arms came around me, careful, as if I might break, I didn't pull away. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't cold. Because his heartbeat against my ear was strong and real. Because in the midst of all this tearing pain and unfair fate, something fierce and burning answered in my own hollow chest. Love. Terrifying, overwhelming, but there. Outside, rivals circled. Inside, two shattered souls clung to each other in the firelight, while upstairs, our daughter slept peacefully for the first time in 2 years. Grace's hidden sacrifice had broken us all, but perhaps, in the ruins, it was also making us whole. The days after Dr. Park's confession blurred into a strange, dreamlike haze. Christmas had come and gone in the Mercer Island estate. Lights twinkling on trees taller than my old apartment building, presents piled beneath them that I had no part in choosing. Sophia tore paper with delighted squeals, calling me Eomma every few minutes, as if testing the word's permanence. I smiled through it all, but inside I was unraveling, thread by thread, memory by memory. I had not left the grounds since that night at the restaurant. Daniel insisted it was for safety. The Lee faction still circled, probing for weakness. But the real prison was the contrast. Every soft towel, every full plate, every warm room reminded me of the life I had lost, the life I had endured. I remembered too clearly the winter before last, sleeping in the doorway of a closed pharmacy in the International District, wind slicing through my thin coat, waking every hour to stamp feeling back into my feet. The humiliation of begging spare change for a cup of coffee that would keep me awake enough to stay safe. The nights I cried myself to sleep on laundromat floors because the dryers were warm. All while my daughter, my flesh, my blood, slept under down comforters in a nursery that cost more to decorate than I had earned in years. Unfair did not begin to cover it. Daniel watched me constantly now, his fair-skinned face etched with new lines of torment. The gnawing remorse that had started with Grace's hidden sacrifice had deepened into something violent, self-lacerating. He blamed himself for every shiver I had ever felt, every skipped meal. And beneath the guilt, the love grew, fierce, possessive, burning hotter with every quiet moment we shared. He found me one afternoon in the conservatory, a glass room filled with orchids and warmth. I sat on a cushioned bench, staring at the lake, jade magpie pendant turning slowly between my fingers. He entered without sound, but I felt him, the way the air changed when he was near. "Emily," he said softly, sitting beside me but leaving space. Always leaving space, as if afraid his intensity would scorch me. I didn't look up. "Your uncle is coming tonight," I said. My voice was small, polite, the way it always became when fear crept in. "You told the staff to prepare the West Wing." He nodded. "Paul Kim, my father's younger brother. He's been distant since Grace died. I thought it was grief." But we both knew now it was something colder. Dinner was formal, long mahogany table, candlelight flickering on crystal. Paul arrived in a charcoal suit, silver hair perfect, smile polished. He looks like an older version of Daniel, but without the haunted eyes. "Nephew," he greeted warmly, embracing Daniel. Then his gaze settled on me. And this must be the miracle who brought Sophia's voice back. I stood, thin frame swallowed by the borrowed dress, one of Grace's, altered to fit my narrower shoulders. "Mr. Kim," I murmured, timid, polite. "Thank you for coming." His eyes assessed me, curious, calculating. "Call me Uncle Paul, my dear. Family now, aren't we?" The word family sliced through me. I was not family. I was the secret they had buried. Sophia saved me, toddling in with her nanny, demanding to sit on my lap. Paul watched her nestle against me, watched her chatter in Korean and English, and something flickered across his face. Satisfaction? Triumph? After Sophia was taken to bed, the men retreated to the study. I lingered in the hallway, unseen, heart pounding. Paul's voice carried through the cracked door. "The board is restless, Daniel. The trust clause, biological heir by 35, or control reverts to the next in line. You've been distracted." Daniel's reply was ice. "I have an heir, Sophia." "But is she legitimate?" Paul asked softly. "Grace carried her, yes, but the records, there are questions." Silence, thick, suffocating. Then Daniel, "What do you know?" Paul laughed, low and smooth. "Everything. I paid Dr. Park $20 million to make the problem disappear after Grace died. The surrogate, poor thing, was told the child didn't survive. Clean, elegant. You got your miracle baby to keep you occupied, and when the time came, I could reveal the truth. The board would have no choice. Control to me. The world dropped away. I gripped the wall to stay upright, dizziness crashing over me in waves. 20 million to steal my child, to keep Daniel distracted while Paul siphoned wealth from the company. Footsteps. I fled before they emerged. Later, Daniel found me in the guest suite, curled on the window seat, staring at black water. He closed the door softly. "You heard." I nodded, tears falling silently. He crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees before me. Again, always this powerful man on his knees for a destitute woman. "I didn't know," he rasped. "Emily, I swear." "I know," I whispered. My voice broke. "But he planned it, all of it. My suffering was his investment." The unfairness tore through me, violent, numbing. Years of cold nights, empty stomach, aching arms that longed for a child who was alive and warm across the lake. All because one man wanted more power. Daniel's hands framed my face, thumbs brushing tears. His own eyes were wet. "I will end this," he vowed, voice shaking with rage and love. "He will never touch you, never touch her." Outside, headlights swept the drive. Leaf action again, emboldened by rumors of family discord. Daniel's phone buzzed. He answered without looking away from me. "They're at the south gate," Min reported. 10 cars, armed. Daniel stood, transforming before my eyes, remorse buried under steel. "Meet them." He kissed my forehead, fierce, burning, then left. From the window I watched. Daniel walked into the rain alone, coat open, fair skin stark under floodlights. His men formed behind him. The rivals emerged, Paul's timing perfect, using chaos to pressure. Words were sharp, postures aggressive. One Lee man stepped too close. Daniel's voice carried on the wind, low and lethal. No one drew weapons, but the threat hung heavy. Minutes stretched. Finally, the intruders retreated, taillights disappearing into mist. Daniel returned, soaked, breathing hard. He came straight to me, water dripping onto antique rugs worth fortunes. "They'll try again," he said. "Paul is directing them now." Horror flooded me. He'll take her. He'll take Sophia to prove she's not... Never. Daniel pulled me against his chest, arms iron bands. I would burn everything first. His heart thundered against my ear. The love pouring from him was overwhelming, passionate from the first spark, now a wildfire that consumes suspicion, guilt, everything but the need to protect. And God help me, I clung back, because I had nothing else, because in his arms the cold years faded, because the destitute girl who had once eaten snow to quiet hunger pains was being loved, fiercely, impossibly, by the man whose family had orchestrated her ruin. We stood in quiet, condensed stillness while rain lashed the windows and enemies circled outside. Paul's masterstroke had been perfect, but he had not counted on one thing. A mother's love is more dangerous than any empire. And Daniel Kim, tormented, remorseful, violently in love, would destroy the world to keep us safe. The week after Paul's confession passed in a storm of preparations I barely understood. Lawyers arrived in waves, discreet men and women in tailored suits carrying briefcases that probably cost more than every possession I had ever owned. Daniel met with them in closed rooms, voice low, face carved from granite. I caught fragments, trust clauses, board votes, emergency provisions. Sophia sensed the tension. She clung to me constantly, small hands fisting my sweater as if I were her only anchor. I held her back just as tightly, because she was mine now, in every way that mattered. But the world outside the gates grew darker. Paul had vanished from the estate that night, leaving only a polite note about urgent business in California. Daniel knew better. Surveillance showed Paul meeting Lee faction leaders in downtown parking garages, late-night handshakes under flickering lights. The pressure was building. One morning, Daniel found me in the nursery, folding tiny clothes that still smelled of baby softness. He stood in the doorway a long moment, watching us. "We're getting married," he said quietly. "Tomorrow. Civil ceremony, here." I froze, a miniature sweater slipping from my fingers. "Married?" His eyes were tormented. Remorse for forcing this, violent conflict between protecting us and hating the cage he was building. But the love burned brightest, fierce and unyielding. "It's the only way," he said, stepping closer. "If you're my wife, Paul can't touch you without declaring war on every ally I have. The board can't question Sophia's legitimacy if there's a new heir on the way. And," his voice roughened, "I can't lose you, either of you." A new heir. The words landed strangely. I had not bled since before the restaurant. Stress, I had told myself, malnutrition. But now suspicion bloomed. That afternoon, a discreet doctor visited, blood drawn, tests run in Daniel's private lab. When the results came back that evening, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, paper trembling in my hands. Pregnant. From the remaining embryos Dr. Park had secretly implanted during what I thought was a routine follow-up after the supposed stillbirth. Insurance, he had later confessed under pressure. A final twist of cruelty to bind me if the truth ever surfaced. I wept then, silent, shoulder-shaking sobs that echoed off marble. Another child, conceived without my knowledge, carried now in a body still recovering from years of hunger. Joy and horror twisted together until I could not tell them apart. Daniel found me there. He read the paper without a word, then sank to the floor beside me, back against the tub. "Twins," he whispered, voice cracking. "The test says twins." The unfairness crashed over us both. I had been starving while embryos, my eggs, his samples, waited in frozen limbo. While I slept under bridges, life had been growing without me. He pulled me into his arms, careful of the fragility he now saw everywhere in me. "I'm sorry," he rasped against my hair, "for all of it, the deception, the years you suffered, this." I clung to him, thin arms fierce. "They're ours," I whispered. "That's all that matters now." The ceremony was small, held in the glass conservatory under strings of soft white lights. I wore a simple ivory dress one of the stylists had found, nothing like the gowns in magazines, but it fit over my still flat stomach. Sophia carried a basket of white rose petals, scattering them with solemn concentration. Daniel stood waiting, fair skin pale against his dark suit, eyes locked on me as if I were the only real thing in his world. When the officiant asked for vows, Daniel spoke his own. "I vow to protect you, Emily Harper, and our children with everything I am. To make up for every cold night, every empty day. To love you, not gently, not safely, but with every fierce part of me, for as long as I breathe." Tears blurred my vision as I repeated simpler words, voice soft and trembling. "I take you, Daniel Kim, not for your wealth or power, but for the man who knelt before a broken woman and saw someone worth saving." And when he kissed me, careful at first, then deeper, hungrier, the world narrowed to the heat of him, the salt of tears between us. That night, the love we had circled for days finally ignited. He carried me to the master bedroom I had never entered before, vast, windows open to the lake, fireplace roaring. Clothes fell away slowly, reverently. He touched every sharp bone, every mark of hardship, with something close to worship. "You're beautiful," he whispered against my skin, voice rough with emotion, every inch that survived. I cried out when we came together, not from pain, but from the overwhelming rightness of it. Passionate, desperate, all barriers burned away. His remorse poured into tenderness. My years of loneliness answered with fierce need. We moved like people who had waited lifetimes, bodies and hearts finally aligning. Afterward, he held me against his chest, hands splayed protectively over my stomach. "I was dead inside before you," he confessed into the dark. "The empire, the deals, the shadows, it was all survival. You and Sophia, you brought me back." I traced the scar on his shoulder, a remnant of treatment years ago. "And you gave me a future when I had none." But even in the afterglow, danger lurked. At dawn, alarms chimed softly. Daniel was out of bed in seconds, pulling on clothes. From the window we saw them, Lee faction cars blocking the bridge to Mercer Island, reinforced now by men in Paul's private security colors. Daniel kissed me hard. "Stay inside, lock the doors." He went out to meet them alone at first, walking the long drive in the pale light. I watched from upstairs, heart in my throat. Words were exchanged, sharp, low. One man gestured aggressively toward the house. Daniel's posture never changed, but his men emerged from hidden positions, forming an unbreakable line. The standoff stretched, minutes bleeding into tension thick enough to cut. Finally, the cars reversed, retreating across the bridge. Daniel returned with rain in his hair and fury in his eyes. "They delivered a message," he said, showing me a single white envelope. Inside, a photograph of my old studio building, eviction notice taped to the door, my few belongings in black trash bags on the wet curb. Paul's reminder. Without Daniel, I had nothing. No home, no safety. The cruelty of it stole my breath. I sank to the floor, dizziness returning. Daniel caught me, carrying me back to bed. "He won't win," he vowed against my temple. "I'll marry you 1,000 times if needed. I'll protect what's mine." Mine. The word should have frightened me. Instead, it settled warm in my chest, because for the first time, someone was fighting the unfairness that had defined my life. Because the twins growing inside me, secret, miraculous, were proof that life could begin again. Because Daniel Kim's love, forced at first by circumstance, was now the truest thing I had ever known. Outside, enemies gathered. Inside, a new family forged in fire held each other through the storm. Paul had played his master stroke, but he had not counted on the power of a mother carrying new life, or the man who would raise empires to keep her safe, or the passionate, burning love that now bound us tighter than any vow. New Year's Eve arrived like a glittering blade, sharp, beautiful, and dangerous. The Tech Gala atop the Columbia Center was Seattle's most exclusive event. Tech titans, venture capitalists, politicians in designer gowns, all pretending the city's reign did not exist 70 stories below. Daniel had decided we would attend, not as a celebration, as a declaration. For days, stylists had transformed me. The woman who once wore threadbare coats now stood in a midnight blue silk gown that hugged the faint new curve of my stomach. The jade magpie pendant rested against my collarbone, a quiet symbol only we understood. My hair, once lank from poor nutrition, was swept into soft waves. I looked like I belonged. But inside, I was still the girl who had eaten from food bank boxes and slept with one eye open in shelters. Daniel watched me descend the staircase, eyes darkening with that familiar mix of love and torment. He wore a black tuxedo cut perfectly to his frame, fair skin luminous under the chandelier light. When he took my hand, his fingers trembled slightly. "You are breathtaking," he whispered, voice rough, "and you are mine." The possessive edge sent heat through me, even as fear coiled in my belly. Mine. After years of having nothing, not even safety, the word felt both terrifying and precious. The motorcade cut through downtown, paparazzi flashes exploding as we stepped onto the red carpet. Daniel's arm around my waist was steel, protective, claiming. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who is she? The wife, they say, married quietly last week. Pregnant already? I kept my chin high, smile steady, but dizziness threatened. The lights, the stairs, the knowledge that Paul was inside somewhere, it all pressed in. We entered the ballroom, crystal chandeliers, string quartet, champagne flutes catching light like stars. Seattle's elite turned to look. Daniel Kim had not appeared publicly with a woman since Grace's death. Now he walked with me on his arm, hand resting deliberately on the small of my back. Then I saw him. Paul Kim stood near the bar, scotch in hand, silver hair gleaming. His smile did not reach his eyes when they met mine. Calculation. Threat. Daniel felt me tense. His grip tightened, reassurance and warning. We circulated slowly, introductions blurred, board members, investors, rivals wearing polite masks. Daniel never left my side. Every time someone asked how we met, he answered smoothly. At a children's charity event, she was volunteering. I was donating. One look and I knew. A beautiful lie, but his eyes on me made it feel true. Paul approached at last, timing perfect, during a lull in the music when eyes drifted our way. Nephew, he greeted warmly, embracing Daniel. Then to me, and the lovely Mrs. Kim. Pregnancy agrees with you. His gaze dropped to my stomach, lingering too long. I placed Daniel's hand there instinctively, palm over the faint swell. A silent message. This heir is coming, legitimate, untouchable. Paul's smile thinned. Congratulations. Twins, I hear. How fortunate. Daniel's voice was velvet over steel. Very fortunate. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Daniel led me to the floor without asking permission. As we moved, he pulled me close, closer than decorum allowed. Stay strong, he murmured against my ear. He's watching every reaction. I nodded, but fear clawed higher. Paul's words echoed. Fortunate. As if the twins were a chess move, not lives. Halfway through the dance, Daniel spun me gently. Over his shoulder, I saw Paul on his phone, face tight, speaking rapidly. My stomach dropped. He's giving an order, I whispered. Daniel's arms tightened. Let him. Tonight we show unity. Tomorrow we strike back. The music swelled. For a moment, the crowd faded. There was only Daniel, his strength holding me up, his love a burning shield against the cold world I had known too long. When the dance ended, applause rippled. Daniel did not release me. Instead, he faced the room, my hand in his. Thank you all for coming, he said, voice carrying effortlessly. Tonight is special, not just for the new year, but because I get to introduce my wife, Emily Kim, and announce that our family is growing. Twins due this summer. Gasps, flashes from phones, genuine smiles from some, calculated from others. Paul raised his glass from across the room, but his eyes were ice. We stepped off the floor. Daniel guided me toward a quiet alcove overlooking the city lights. You were perfect, he said, brushing a thumb over my cheek. Brave, beautiful. I leaned into him, exhaustion crashing. I'm scared. I know. His voice broke slightly. I'm terrified too, of failing you, of not being enough to fix what was broken. The remorse in him was raw tonight, gnawing deeper because now he had so much more to lose. Outside the windows, Seattle glittered, ferries crossing black water, Space Needle glowing, a city of wealth and shadows. A commotion at the entrance drew eyes, security speaking urgently into earpieces. Daniel's phone buzzed. Min's voice. Boss, breach at the estate, silent alarms tripped, nanny not responding on secure line. The world tilted. Dizziness hit so hard I swayed. Sophia, I gasped. Paul was gone from his spot. Daniel's face turned to stone. He drew us here, paraded us while his team went for the house. Horror flooded me, cold, numbing. My baby, alone. While I wore silk and smiled for cameras. Daniel was already moving, pulling me with him. We're leaving, now. The ballroom erupted in confusion as we pushed through. Guests parted, whispers rising. Daniel barked orders into his phone, vehicles, routes, contingencies. In the elevator down, he held me crushed against him. I will get her back, he vowed, voice shaking with rage and fear. I swear on my life. Tears blurred everything. The unfairness tore fresh wounds. I had finally found safety, love, a future, and now it was being ripped away to punish us for existing. The lobby doors opened to chaos, paparazzi, valet scramble. Our SUV screeched to the curb. But across the street, black sedans blocked the intersection. Leaf action, reinforced. Daniel shoved me behind him. His men poured from side doors, forming a wedge. The lead rival stepped forward, smirk cold. "Mr. Kim, traffic delay. Shame." Daniel's reply was lethal calm. "Move, or this becomes a problem for everyone." Standoff. Seconds stretched. Phones recorded from windows above. No one wanted public mess. Finally, the cars parted, just enough. We sped into the night, Daniel driving like a man possessed, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping mine. "I love you," he said suddenly, fiercely. "More than the empire, more than my life. If I lose everything else, I will not lose you." The confession tore the last walls from my heart. I squeezed back, tears falling. "And I love you," I whispered. The man who saw a starving waitress and decided she was worth saving. Rain lashed the windshield as we raced toward Mercer Island. Paul had played his cruelest card, but he had underestimated one thing. A father and mother, bound by passionate, burning love, would tear the world apart to reach their child. The gala lights faded behind us. Ahead lay only darkness and the fight for our daughter. The drive from downtown Seattle to Mercer Island felt like descending into a nightmare. Rain hammered the windshield, wipers fighting a losing battle. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other locked around mine, knuckles white. Every red light felt like a betrayal. Every mile stretched into eternity. Sophia, my baby, our baby, taken while we smiled for cameras in silk and tuxedos. The unfairness clawed at my throat. Just hours ago, I had been dancing in a world of crystal and wealth, pretending I belonged. Now the old terror returned, the powerless dread of a woman who once had nothing to lose because she already had nothing. We crashed through the estate gates, tires screeching on wet gravel. The house loomed dark, front door ajar, a wound in the night. Daniel was out before the engine died, pulling me with him. Security vehicles surrounded us, men fanning out with flashlights cutting the rain. Inside, chaos. Overturned furniture, a shattered vase, the nanny bound and gagged in the kitchen, alive, thank God, but dazed. No Sophia. Daniel's face was a mask of controlled fury, but I saw the torment beneath, remorse that he had left her vulnerable, violent conflict tearing him apart for bringing us into the open tonight. Upstairs, the nursery door hung open, the crib empty, blankets trailing to the floor like shed skin. On Sophia's pillow lay the severed jade magpie pendant, my pendant's twin, drenched in red paint that looked too much like blood in the flashlight beams. A note pinned beneath. "She looks just like her mother. Let's hope she has better luck." I sank to my knees, a sound escaping me I didn't recognize, half sob, half scream. Dizziness crashed over me, the room spinning. Daniel caught me before I hit the floor, arms iron around my shaking body. "I've got you," he rasped. "We'll get her back." His phone buzzed, unknown number. He answered on speaker. Paul's voice, calm and cruel. "Happy New Year, nephew. Enjoying the fireworks?" Where is she? Daniel's words were ice, but his heart thundered against my ear. Safe, for now. The child is leverage. Come alone to the Space Needle observation deck. Midnight. No security, no police. Or she learns what gravity feels like from 600 feet. The line went dead. Midnight. Less than an hour. Daniel's men protested, trap, suicide mission. But his decision was made. The remorse in him had crystallized into something lethal. We raced downtown again, convoys splitting to confuse tales. Leaf action cars shadowed us, bold now that Paul had shown his hand. At one intersection, they boxed us in, 4 vehicles, deliberate. Daniel rolled his window down in the rain. "Move." The lead driver smirked. "Orders are to delay." Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper that carried. You have 10 seconds before this becomes permanent. His men emerged from shadows, silent, disciplined. No weapons visible, but the threat was absolute. The blockade parted. We reached the Space Needle with minutes to spare. The tourist decks were closed for the holiday, but Paul had arranged access. Wind howled at 80 miles an hour, rain horizontal. Daniel turned to me in the elevator. "Stay down here. Lock the doors." "No." My voice was small but unbreakable. "She's my daughter. I'm coming." His eyes searched mine, love and terror warring. Then he nodded once. The observation deck doors opened to a nightmare. Paul stood near the edge, Sophia dangling by the back of her tiny nightgown over the void. Her plush magpie clutched in one hand, face streaked with tears. Wind whipped her curls. "One step closer and she learns to fly," Paul shouted over the gale. Daniel dropped his coat, hands visible. "Let her go, Paul. This is between us." Paul laughed, manic. "Exactly. Choose, the Empire or the girl. You jump, I pull her back. You stay, she falls." Horror froze me in place. Sophia's whimpers carried on the wind. "Eomma." Daniel didn't hesitate. He stepped toward the ledge. "No," I screamed. He looked back once, eyes burning with love, remorse, apology. "I love you," he said clearly. "Both of you, always." Then he climbed onto the parapet. Paul smiled, noble end, and opened his hand. Time slowed. Sophia slipped. I moved without thought, throwing myself across slick tiles, gown tearing, sliding under the railing. My hand clamped around her ankle, just as she vanished over the edge. Impact slammed me against the bars, shoulder wrenched nearly from socket. I dangled halfway off the deck, holding her entire weight with one arm, wind and rain battering us both. "I've got you," I screamed through tears. "Eomma's got you." Sophia's terrified cries pierced the storm. Paul stared down, stunned. He raised a pistol. Daniel had never intended to jump. In the moment Paul's attention shifted, Daniel dove for the weapon he'd dropped earlier, scooped it up in one fluid motion. The shot cracked like thunder. Paul staggered, shock on his face, clutching his chest. He toppled backward over the railing, vanishing into the dark without a sound. Daniel rushed to the edge. With adrenaline strength, he hauled us both back onto the deck. We collapsed in a heap, me, Sophia, Daniel, sobbing, shaking, alive. He wrapped us in his arms, burying his face in my neck. "We're safe," he choked. "I've got you, both of you." Sophia looked up, small hands touching our faces. "Eomma, Appa, family." The word hung in the storm, fragile and fierce. Later, wrapped in blankets in the back of the SUV, Sophia asleep between us, Daniel held me like I was the only real thing left. "I almost lost you both," he whispered, voice raw. The thought, it destroyed me. I pressed my forehead to his. "You didn't. We're here." His hand splayed over my stomach, protective, reverent. The love between us, born in suspicion, forged in fire, was now unbreakable, passionate, consuming. The kind that survived rooftops and betrayal. Paul's body would be found below. The empire would shift, threats would retreat. But in that moment, there was only us. A mother who had once eaten from trash cans, now holding her daughter safe. A tormented billionaire who had found redemption in loving us. And the twins, waiting to be born into a world we would fight to make worthy. The rain eased as we drove home. The nightmare was over. But the love, the fierce, burning love, had only just begun. The weeks following the rooftop blurred into a fragile peace that felt borrowed, like sunlight breaking through Seattle clouds only to vanish again. Paul's death was ruled an accidental fall during a private New Year's visit to the Space Needle. Daniel's influence ensured the investigation closed quickly. The Lee faction scattered, leaderless and wary. Board members fell in line, the trust clause rendered meaningless by the undeniable legitimacy of the twins I carried. Yet peace was an illusion. I woke often from nightmares, Sophia slipping from my grasp, the wind stealing her cries. My body changed daily, stomach rounding, exhaustion deepening, but the fear lingered. Daniel watched me with eyes that never fully relaxed, remorse and love intertwined so tightly I could feel them in every touch. He had dissolved shadowy contracts, sold divisions tied to old alliances. The empire shifted toward ethical AI, cleaner paths. But power never truly relinquishes its hold. One gray February morning, Daniel's phone rang while we sat in the sunlit breakfast room. Sophia colored at the table, chattering about bunnies. I was sipping tea, hand resting on the swell of my belly where the twins kicked in gentle rhythm. Daniel answered, face hardening instantly. Speaker on, a distorted voice. We have proof, recordings, documents. Everything about the surrogacy fraud, the clinic payoffs, Paul's schemes. Enough to destroy you. The board, the stock price, your pretty new family. The day passed in suffocating stillness. Daniel prepared alone, writing letters, transferring controls, ensuring I would never want. I begged, pleaded, raged, but his decision was iron. I've lived with shadows too long, he told me in the library, voice breaking. I won't let them touch you, any of you. Night fell cold and clear. The Aurora Bridge, high above the ship canal, a place of too many tragedies. Daniel insisted I stay home. I refused. We drove in silence, Sophia with the nanny under heavy guard. Security trailed at a distance. Daniel's final order, do not interfere. The bridge was closed to traffic for maintenance, arranged by whoever held the files. Floodlights cast harsh shadows. A single drone hovered, live stream ready. Daniel stepped out alone, coat open to the wind. Fair skin pale under the lights, he looked like a man walking to his execution. The distorted voice crackled from a speaker on the railing. No tricks. Climb the outer ledge. Jump clean. We'll know if you hesitate. Daniel looked back once, at the SUV where I waited, hidden in shadow. His eyes said everything. Love, apology, goodbye. He climbed. Wind whipped his hair. He balanced on the narrow beam, city lights glittering far below. I could not breathe. The voice counted down. 10, 9. Daniel spread his arms. I burst from the car, screaming his name. But something changed. Mid-count, the drone feed cut to static. Lights flickered. The speaker went silent. Daniel paused, confused. Then, from the shadows, Min and a small team emerged, moving fast. They had traced the signal, jammed the stream, neutralized the hidden operators in seconds. The trade had been a feint. Paul's remaining loyalists, desperate to salvage something, had orchestrated it as a final trap. But Daniel had anticipated betrayal within betrayal. He had never intended to jump, only to draw them out. In the chaos, a hidden figure lunged, knife flashing toward Daniel's back. I ran without thinking, gown heavy, belly cumbersome. I threw myself between them, taking the shallow slash across my arm instead. Daniel roared, primal, heartbroken. He disarmed the attacker in one brutal motion, men swarming. But the shock hit me hard. Blood warm on my skin, dizziness overwhelming. I crumpled. Daniel caught me, face contorted with horror. Emily! The wound was not deep, flesh, not fatal, but the terror of almost losing him, of the twins endangered, tore the last fragile threads of my composure. He carried me to the car, pressing his coat to the cut, voice breaking. I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Medics arrived swiftly, private, discreet. Stitches in the back of the ambulance while Daniel held my hand, tears falling silently onto our joined fingers. Back home, bandaged and safe, we sat in the nursery firelight. Sophia asleep down the hall, the twins quiet at last. Daniel knelt, again, head bowed. "I almost left you," he whispered. The thought of jumping, it was real for a moment, to protect you. But I couldn't, not when I have everything to live for. I pulled him up, fingers tracing his face. "We trade nothing," I said fiercely. "Not you, not our children. We fight together." His remorse poured out then, violent, cleansing. For the years I suffered unknown to him. For the empire that had cost so much. For almost sacrificing himself. I kissed him, soft at first, then desperate. The love that had burned since the restaurant now flared brighter, forged unbreakable by this final test. We made love that night slowly, reverently, his hands gentle over my wound, my belly, mapping every inch as if memorizing life itself. Tears mingled, whispers of forever. The trade had failed. Paul's last allies were gone, the files destroyed, and in the quiet aftermath, Daniel Kim, the man who had once commanded shadows, chose light. For me, for our daughter, for the sons waiting to be born. The bridge had not taken him. Love had saved him. And in saving him, I finally saved myself from the cold, hungry ghost I had been. Spring crept into Seattle slowly, cherry blossoms drifting like pink snow along the lakefront. My belly had grown heavy with the twins, movements constant now, small feet pressing against my ribs as if reminding me life persisted despite everything. Daniel had become my shadow, gentle, watchful, tormented by the memory of the Aurora Bridge. He worked from home most days, dissolving the last dark threads of his empire. The remorse in him had not faded. If anything, it deepened with every ultrasound photo, every kick he felt under his palm. He carried the weight of my lost years like a personal debt he could never fully repay. I tried to forgive the past, tried to believe we were safe, but safety was another illusion. One April afternoon, while Daniel was in the city finalizing a clean acquisition, a package arrived. No return address, just my name in neat script. Inside, a flash drive and a single photograph. Me, years ago, thin and hollow-eyed, asleep on a shelter cot. On the back, handwritten, "Some things can't be bought." My hands shook as I plugged the drive into Daniel's secure laptop. Files opened. Audio recordings, emails, bank transfers. Proof that Dr. Park had not acted alone. That Grace's infertility had been hidden not just from Daniel, but because of a deeper betrayal. Grace had discovered Daniel's leukemia early, before doctors did. She had delayed telling him, hoping to spare him pain while she searched for matches. In desperation, she turned to Paul, who controlled family medical trusts. Paul refused to help unless Grace agreed to something unthinkable: sign over future voting rights in the company should Daniel die without an heir. Grace, terrified of losing him, agreed. But when her own marrow proved compatible, she donated anyway, saving Daniel's life at the cost of her fertility and hiding Paul's extortion to protect Daniel from the truth. The double betrayal. Paul had blackmailed Grace into the surrogacy fraud, knowing infertility would force her hand. He had engineered everything: the failed embryos, the egg switch, the cover-up, not just for inheritance, but to break Daniel completely. I sat frozen, dizziness washing over me in waves. The room spun. Grace had not just sacrificed her body, she had been coerced by the man she trusted as family. Daniel returned to find me on the library floor, flash drive clutched like evidence in a trial. He read everything in silence. When he finished, he did not rage. He simply aged 10 years in minutes. She protected me, he whispered, from him, from the truth, and I never knew. The remorse crashed over him, violent, annihilating. He had mourned Grace as a flawed wife when she had been a victim twice over, and I had hated her in quiet moments for stealing my child when she had been manipulated into it. We held each other in the fading light, two people broken by secrets we had not created. But Paul was dead, or so we believed. That night, alarms shrieked again. Security feeds showed a breach, single intruder scaling the cliffside from the lake. Impossible angles, professional. Daniel armed himself, ordering lockdown. I hid with Sophia in the panic room, heart pounding, twins restless inside me. Minutes later, Min's voice over intercom. Intruder neutralized, but boss, you need to see this. We emerged to the great hall. The intruder lay bound, masked pulled away to reveal a face we knew. Dr. Park, alive. Hidden by Paul's network all these months. He laughed, bloodied but defiant. Paul planned for every contingency, including his own death. The files go public at dawn unless I check in. Your empire ends. Your family branded frauds. Daniel's control fractured. You helped him destroy lives. Park sneered. I helped him win. The girl, the surrogate, was nothing. Street trash. You elevated her to queen. Pathetic. Rage blinded me. The words echoed every humiliation. The nights I'd gone hungry to save for bus fare to the clinic, the mornings waking in doorways, the years believing my baby dead. Something snapped. I moved before thought, grabbing the small pistol Daniel had taught me to use for protection. My hands, once too weak to carry groceries, now steady. Daniel saw, eyes widening. Emily. I stepped forward, voice no longer timid. You took my daughter. You took my years. You called me nothing. Park's bravado faltered. I didn't shoot to kill. I aimed low, knee shattered with a single report. He screamed. Daniel froze, shock and pride warring on his face. I leaned close to Park. Confess. Everything. On camera. Or the next one ends you. And he broke sobbing out the full truth. Paul's blackmail of Grace, the deliberate egg switch, the plan to expose Sophia later, all recorded. Then, in the quiet that followed, I asked the question burning in me. Where are the originals? Park whispered a location, an offshore server farm. Daniel's team moved instantly, hacking, destroying every copy. But one final betrayal waited. As medics arrived for Park, a hidden device activated, self-destruct in his watch, meant to erase evidence if captured. The blast was small, contained, but shrapnel caught me as I turned to shield my belly. Pain exploded, sharp, blinding. I fell. Daniel's scream echoed as he caught me. Blood warm on silk. Medics swarmed. The wound was serious, deep laceration near the twins. Emergency surgery. I drifted in and out, hearing Daniel's voice raw with terror. Stay with me, please. I can't lose you. Hours later, I woke in the private wing, twins safe, monitored closely. Stitches pulling, but alive. Daniel sat beside the bed, head in hands. When he looked up, tears tracked his fair-skinned cheeks. You saved us, he whispered. Again. I reached for him, weak but certain. We saved each other. The vengeance was mine, not just for me, but for Grace, for Sophia, for the twins. Paul's network crumbled that night. Final allies exposed, arrested quietly. Dr. Park survived, but broken. Testimony sealed our protection forever. In the quiet, condensed weeks of recovery, Daniel dissolved the last shadows. The empire became clean, vast but ethical. And in the stillness of nights, he held me gently, remorse healed by truth, love burning brighter for having survived fire. I, the woman who once had nothing, had taken vengeance with my own hand, and in doing so, claimed my place not as rescued, but as equal, as partner, as the heart of the most powerful man in Seattle. The double betrayal was over, vengeance complete. Love, fierce, passionate, eternal, remained. Christmas 2026 arrived gentle and bright, snow falling soft over Mercer Island for the first time in years. The twins, Ethan and Elijah, had come into the world 3 months earlier in the master bedroom overlooking the lake, born healthy and strong despite every fear. I held them now, one in each arm, while Sophia danced around us in a tiny red dress, singing carols she had learned from the radio. Daniel watched from the doorway, fair-skinned face softened by a year of healing. The empire had changed, cleaner, brighter, focused on education and health initiatives across the city. He had poured resources into shelters, food programs, clinics, the very places that had once been my only refuge. Not to erase guilt, he said, but because knowledge of suffering demanded action. I still marveled at the contrast. The woman who had once huddled in doorways, thin and shivering, now sat wrapped in cashmere beside a roaring fire. The disparity no longer humiliated me. It reminded me how far love could carry a person. Yet the past lingered in quiet moments. Nightmares sometimes woke me, cold wind, empty arms. Daniel would pull me close, whispering apologies into my hair for years he could not change. His remorse had not vanished. It had transformed into fierce devotion. That evening, after the children slept, Daniel led me to the conservatory. Snow muffled the world outside, orchids blooming defiant against winter. He had dismissed the staff, lit only candles. He knelt, not in proposal this time, but in surrender. "Emily," he began, voice rough with emotion, "I married you to protect you. I stayed married to you because I could not breathe without you. But I need to ask again, not for safety, not for heirs, but because every day I love you more violently than the last." Tears blurred my vision. The powerful man who commanded billions now trembled before me. I was empty, he continued. Wealth, influence, meaningless. You, who had nothing, taught me everything about richness, about compassion that crosses every divide, skin, status, past. Love that refuses to be bound by what the world calls fair. I slid to the floor with him, careful of healing scars. "And you," I whispered, took a destitute woman who believed she was worth nothing and showed her she was everything. We renewed vows there among the flowers, simple words, no officiant but the snow falling silent witness. When he kissed me, it was not gentle. It was explosive, passionate, consuming, the kind of love that had survived betrayal, rooftops, vengeance. Hands desperate, breaths mingling, bodies remembering every storm we had weathered together. Later, wrapped in blankets before the fireplace, he traced the faint scar on my arm from the final confrontation. "I almost lost you," he said, voice breaking anew. "But you didn't." I pressed his palm to my heart. We chose each other, every day. He smiled then, rare, full, unguarded. Knowledge of pain makes joy deeper. Lesson learned the hardest way. We spoke often now of lessons, how education, not just books, but lived experience, shaped compassion. How knowledge of hunger drove generosity. How education about another's suffering erased barriers of wealth or poverty. Knowledge that love was colorblind, status blind. Lesson that true family was chosen, not born. The estate gates remained strong, but they protected now, not imprisoned. We opened them often, hosting children from shelters for holidays, funding programs that taught coding to those who once stood in food lines beside me. Sophia grew tall and confident, speaking freely, calling us Eomma and Appa with equal joy. The twins learned early to share toys with visitors who had none. 1 year after the twins' birth, we celebrated quietly in the garden. Snow melted, cherry blossoms returning. Daniel fastened the restored jade magpie necklace around my neck, now joined by a simple platinum band engraved inside. Love knows no divide. I looked at him, at the man who had knelt before a starving waitress and seen a queen, and felt the full weight of grace. Wealth had not separated us from compassion. Poverty had not diminished our capacity to love. Skin color, background, past, none of it mattered. Only the heart, only the choice to love fiercely, daily. What did you think of this ending, dear viewers? Did your heart ache with Emily's memories of cold nights and soar with their final peace? How does this story touch your own life? Perhaps a time when love crossed impossible divides. Share in the comments below. I read every one, eager to hear the emotions from deep within your hearts. If this tale moved you, please like, subscribe, and share the YouTube channel Alex Truths, so together we can enjoy many more engaging videos every day. Remember, knowledge shapes compassion. Lesson by lesson, education builds bridges. Knowledge heals old wounds. Lesson learned through pain becomes wisdom shared. Education, formal or lived, reminds us love is the greatest knowledge of all. I wish you all good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. See you in the next video. Description: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.